perennial problem for many writers, most writers in fact. The beginning of an essay presents unique challenges to students, which is why I made this little video. This video does not cover every opportunity, every introduction, style, technique, strategy. It offers some common sense advice and some bare bones advice for what my students have succeeded well with in the past. I know that seems a little counterintuitive, and sometimes people want all the options laid out before them, but I'm here to tell you that introductions, while important, sometimes overshadow any work that you can actually do in the essay themselves, or are so time-consuming that a student's entire writing time is spent trying to perfect that opening, and I think that's a mistake. I think there are other things that you can attend to in an essay that makes it really good, and the writing that make it really good. And the introduction, while important, shouldn't be the thing that overwhelms everything else. You might go back to the beginnings here, the beginnings of introductions. What do we expect from any kind of opening? You might remember what you got from your other classes, either in high school or in college, in terms of what they suggested for giving an opening. You might even think about openings more generally, of anything. A class where you might have a joke or maybe a name game thing to get people introduced to each other. Or a meeting, or an email, although nowadays we live in an age where people don't even sign their emails. But don't we expect some kind of opening that introduces ourselves at least a little bit? If we're at a party, don't we have an opening to meet new people or strangers, or to renew old acquaintances? Don't we at least say, hey, how are you doing, or give each other a little nudge or fist bump or something that is an opening? There's something that is expected, really, when you first greet another human being. And so too with writing, though oftentimes there are unique challenges that make writing that opening more difficult than others. Much of the suggestions I'll give come from a great book written by Joseph Williams called Style. I won't go into too much detail in it, but I'm just taking a few key ideas that I think really do help students. For starters, don't start by writing the opening, which really seems counterintuitive to students. They want to start with the opening and then proceed right to the ending. One key thing that really helped me and many of my students in the past is that if you avoid focusing too much on the introduction, you can actually get to where you want to be. In creating these PowerPoints, I started with some central, I suppose we call them body paragraphs or slides that I knew I wanted to use in the middle of the presentation, and then work my way backward to the beginning, which is actually very similar to an essay. You start sort of in the middle with the things that are what I call non-negotiables, the things that you know have to be in the essay. For an observation description paper, it's going to be that description. For a research paper, it's obviously going to be a presentation of your research. And then you work your way back to the beginning of what it is that you have to do. So you can kind of track your way back. If you want to use an analogy, you can think of it as leaving a trail of breadcrumbs back to the things that you really needed to get across through the paper. You can imagine that there are central body paragraphs. The entree of the dinner. Do you always plan the opening of a dinner before you actually plan the entree? Not many people do they? Anyway, my suggestion is not to start with the beginning, but to work back to it. Or if you have to, if you just can't start the essay without the introduction in place, then start with something provisional that you know you'll go back and change. The point is to get to the centerpiece of the essay, or maybe even the conclusion, so that you can work your way back. I think that makes life easier, actually, because especially in a day and age when it's so easy to do this and you're working on a computer, you can fashion what you know needs to be in the essay, the things that you know are going to be checked for, the things that are essential for that email or for any communication that you send. They have to be there, so start with those, right? And then work your way back to where you know you need to be. Other suggestions. Here are some things that people expect from an opening. You need to set some context, to briefly explain your purpose, and if you've started in the middle of your essay, you know what your purpose is going to be about. It'll be fresh in mind, and that's one advantage to starting in the middle of the essay or in the body paragraphs of the essay. And the opening should really hook a reader in some way. Now that doesn't mean it should shock a reader. Sometimes people take that hooking a reader, they say, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you scare the heck out of them, or that you present something that is so totally offensive that they dare not continue. But you do interest them, and you have to set out to interest them. And if you're worried about that, realize that every writer's gone through that, trying to make their essay interesting. All right, so you need to set context. That's one of the very first criteria, as you can tell from our previous slide. To set context means that you're in the middle of something. Where are we in the middle of? What is the status of the topic, for example? What is it in the middle of it? The problem just starting? Is it a situation that's been resolved? Is it a situation that you need to describe the context in full detail to understand? The idea is that you're, in the middle either of a class or a topic, and you can set some context very quickly, I think, by explaining where you are. Now, I say that, and I want to avoid, as many instructors will encourage, avoiding the Genesis quotation at the beginning or writing a strategy where students will begin since the beginning of time. I think a statement like that is so broad as to almost be meaningless. You can't give context from the beginnings of primordial soup or wherever you want to start the beginnings in an essay, because you'll actually never get to your topic, and because it's ineffective usually as a beginning. You'll find it a lot in bad journalism where they try to set context by going back to the beginnings of recorded history or something that they think has been common, and usually it hasn't been common since the beginning of time. I think that sticking with the immediate situation, what is it that you're in the middle of? That's a better approach. Where are you? You might think of this, especially if your description is important either to the class or to where you are doing your observation description, for example. If location is important, that's where you were. Otherwise, think in terms of where you are in the class. Beginning of the semester, end of the semester, sometimes after a project and you're reflecting on it. Where are you in it? Or when are you writing? Is it the past or present? Are you old and young or young? Is it the beginning or end of the class? Think of that as the context, because that can give you a help, at least with the immediate prospect of getting a context out there. We just finished this assignment, and then that'll get you going. You'll be on to your next subject. You want to briefly explain your purpose when you set out your beginning. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but it should be enough so that we know where you're going. The thesis, main point, that's what we're usually talking about here, that funny word thesis meaning main point. It's usually about a sentence or two. Do you have to say it all before a conclusion? No, but please give a reader a hint as to where you're going. That's something we really do need. That will help us get to the next step. And to know, generally speaking, what the essay is about. You don't begin by taking a look at the sciences and then go on to talk about the arts or something totally unrelated. You set us up at the beginning to know what it is that you're going to be expecting for the rest of the essay. If you're familiar with this, it's a kind of foreshadowing, I suppose, but a kind of prediction that you can set forward at the beginning as to where you'll end up toward the end of the essay. Okay, it can also be a problem and solution. That's pretty common. All right. And then a hook, some kind of hook that gets us understanding what's going on here. Hooks are hard to explain, except that they're really necessary. You have to interest us in your topic. We've taken a look at one, this first quote, actually, for a reading that we had in class, the Samuel Scudder reading. And he simply sets context and tries to interest us in a discovery that he made. Remember, he'll describe it as the best lesson he ever got outside of his field of study. He says, it was more than 15 years ago that I entered the laboratory of Professor Agassiz and told him I had enrolled as a student of natural history. Set some context. This is what happened. It was a while ago. I was in this class. Here's the professor. Okay? Or here's a student essay that begins, you may not think that perching high in trees is someplace for anyone but squirrels and birds, but I'm here to tell you that I fit in really well. That's a pretty good hook. We want to read that essay because we want to find out what he does there that's so unusual and that really gives a meaning and purpose to his life, as he'll go on to say in the course of his essay. When you hook a reader, it's something that sets your writing apart, your view. How is what you have to offer unique, either because of how you learned in the science class or because of what you know about being up in the tree? What are you adding to the discussion? Here's your point to add, here's the time to add your perspective or your point of view that really does help the essay. If there is what people commonly think about an essay, how is the reality different? Here's where you can surprise people. And usually a hook can surprise us. It doesn't have to shock us again, but it should interest us. It should say, well, this essay is actually contributing something more. It's not the standard rehashed, tired essay. You can think of this. Sometimes the subject of your paper obligates you to provide certain information at the opening of the essay. This is the time when you set up that context. I was in this class. This is what happened to me. I was in this tree. This is what happened to me. That also can be a point where you add your 2 cents or what makes your essay different, what will make your essay different, or at least a hint at that hook that's coming up in the essay. And generally speaking, of course, you're given advice like this all the time, but I try to give it here too. You want to avoid the formulaic openings. A quote, a definition, an anecdote. Those could be openings, but if people set out to do those things rather than actually set up what and answer what your reader expects from an opening, I think is inefficient and usually doesn't work out well for the student. Oftentimes the student will give a quote, but they won't relate how the quote matches the subject of the essay. Or sometimes they'll give a definition when it's wholly unnecessary. The word is commonly in use and we know the definition already. Or if it's an anecdote, sometimes it might be appropriate and sometimes it's totally thrown in there. Formulaic openings do not help, or really the ultimate best formula is stick with the content of the essay. That's why you shouldn't start with that introduction. Start with the thing that you know you want to say. The formulaic opening often doesn't work, as it says here, unless the student masters what the reader expects. And that's really where we start with any good opening. What does the reader expect from me, and how do I get them to my point? Voila! Here we are at the end.